Hello Function and hello DevTips. This is David. MPJ and I, we tried out a small experiment where we discussed two topics in two separate videos on this channel and on the other channel. The topics were taken from the Fun forum, the forum that Function patrons have access to. We think this is an interesting experiment to try out different formats that coexist in both spaces. We really hope that you will enjoy this, but we're very eager to hear your feedback. Like, is this something that you would like to see more or less of? Do you want us to experiment more or less? Please write your comment. Please comment with your feedback. And the reason I'm shooting this is because MPJ and I, of course, forgot to shoot a proper intro. That's just the way life is. I'm gonna get back and edit this and see you in the comments. Cheers! Okay, first answer. Generally speaking, I have a hard time dealing with authority for authority's sake. I think that if you're working for a startup or a business that started as a startup but now is a regular business, but one of the founders is still working there, often as CEO or CTO, I think that is pretty common. That they still have their technical know-how and they know how to do things, but the thing is that they started the company 15 years ago. Yeah. And then they knew to do coding, if it's in Visual Basic if it is in Delphi or whatever what was ruling at that time. But they have sort of like, they don't want to let go of that technical, I don't know, the technical grip of the technology stack, even though it's worse for them that they...
Did you read like the blog article that Slack made like a couple of years ago? Like they just like, oh, we're doing PHP, it's not so bad. And then like I was almost sort of convinced by it, and then like it took like 6 months or so, and Slack just turned into this pile of incredible slowness and bugginess, I just realized like, this might have been like an after construction. I think that this was just the start, like the founders that just were PHP people, they did it, they knew it, and they just coded away, and then it just turned into this unmaintainable ball of shite.
And also when they started, they didn't have that many users. Perhaps they have had a couple of 100,000 current users, but now they have probably millions. Yep. And it's a totally different challenge.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so but how do you deal with them? Like, so if you have the CEO...
I was kind of about to just say leave. I have not been in a situation where I was able to solve that. Have you?
No, yeah, you know the story that I was working at this company that had like this, everything was built around like Microsoft SQL Server stored procedures, which is sort of like a function in SQL.
Yeah.
And
was this a company that wanted to hire you again later, for like where the founders wanted to hire you again for their new company?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
But and stored procedures, they were good because they were pretty, like you could write them pretty fast. So in that way, like the SQL Server is pretty efficient at doing what they wanted to do. So that was okay, but it was pretty unmaintainable. You couldn't really test it. And at that time, they didn't have support, like those procedures didn't have like transactions. So if something went wrong while they were processing, they couldn't roll back. So they had processed like half of all the customer database, and it was a mess. But that was because the CEO knew stored procedures and he knew SQL, so he wanted to have that control. And also all the business logic was in those stored procedures. So I guess that was fine. So I think that was like a middle ground where if you like can figure out what part it is that like hippo.
I remember this guy. I because I interviewed at this company back in the day. Yeah, I did. But yeah, because I don't know how related you were to it, but either way, I was interviewing there, and I was surprised to like he was part of the interview process, and this was at the time quite a big company. Like it was several hundred people, but he was still involved in every interview, which. Like, I was first impressed by, wow, this guy is down on the floor and in touch with everything. But like, the interview questions that he asked were kind of shitty.
Was this a
like
Subway question?
Yeah, that's a bullshit interview question. That's a bad interview question.
So the question was...
yeah, because he does this with everyone then.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if
that
he
makes
still...
it even
he
worse.
did that with everyone. So this question
Yeah.
is, in Stockholm, there are 100 subway stops.
Yeah.
How many subway carts, like how many wagons are there?
Yeah.
At peak hour or something like that.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of that is to see that you're being interviewed by the CEO, and it's like you have to do some maths, but you don't have to do any advanced maths, then you have to do some estimates and everything. Like the whole purpose of it is not to solve anything or like figure out, it's just to see how you work under stress.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it. And according to
a very specific type of stress.
Yeah. And according to that company lore, some people had just like didn't like the question and then got up and left. And presumably that would be like a bad hire. I don't know if that's true.
Sure. Yeah. That's an interesting...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it's not like... yeah. Like the brain... Like Google used to do these brain benders for a while. And they just realized that it's kind of a... it's often it's just a bad way of judging people's thinking because it's so much related to luck in thinking.
Yeah.
It's just that you happen to fall into the like during that short time you need to be lucky to fall into like the right way of thinking at this like at the specific time. It just doesn't. It's just not bad, especially if like. But if he does the same interview question with everyone, then it will eventually spread so that you can prepare for the interview as well.
Like with the Google questions, that there are companies that just train people to try to get hired by Google.
Yes, I've actually been coached by such a company.
Yeah, and you've been coached by me for the maths parts of that interview.
Yes, that was pretty cool. It was interesting. Like I've been interviewed by Google for the viewers. I've been interviewed by Google and Facebook during one time where there was an acquisition like pending. We didn't get it, but I don't know if it was me or if it was anyone else as a team because we were rejected as a team. I'm kind of frustrated that I never got that feedback. I kind of think I did well on 3 of the 4 interviews, but one of them was really like it didn't do well.
Yeah, because you don't have like the engineering, like the proper like university engineering math background.
No, precisely. I don't have a computer science degree, but I'm kind of I'm very satisfied with how I like could amass quite a bit of it, like at least the parts that were required for interview questions in like the 2 months or something that we had to prepare for that thing.
Yeah, okay, so back on track. So this, like a CEO or someone that claims technical expertise but doesn't have it. So with this CEO example that I was telling, he had all these stored procedures.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay because he had the business logic and he wanted to control that. That's fine. So we just like built everything so he could do that. But then other things that weren't like front-end stuff and all that.
Yeah.
All those things like that he didn't care about that.
Yeah.
So we could do whatever. But I was
like,
going
what was kind of like the consequences of that?
The consequences of that was that it broke down from time to time because he worked nights sometimes and then he like made changes and then you could come in at work and something didn't work, and that was because everything was just nested in like just one big, everything was connected in a sort of bad way.
Yeah.
So perhaps the like
it was not
customer support
modularized.
application didn't work because he was running all his queries, so the database was working hard, so and all other queries were depending on the database, so then like work stopped for an hour perhaps because things were running.
Was he aware of the consequences of his behavior?
Yes.
All right.
But he thought that, yeah, like the company was doing really well and it was acquired, and like I think he did. I think he sort of made the correct decision in one way, because the other thing is that they're often like when a developer has sort of like this super fancy idea, like they want to build sort of like I have this thing, like we build an interface with classes and stuff, and then inherits and then extends and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you need to have like a PhD degree to understand the code because it's so clever.
Sure.
And then the CEO or someone else can't understand it. And perhaps not even some of the like peer developers can understand it. And that is sort of like the other part of it.
Sure,
like
but sometimes you need to have a PhD in order to understand code, because it is structured in a way because it is highly complex, and we need to like break it apart and have like a modular structure in order to deal with it. Like if you just pile things in a like where it's just a mess, then like you can't deal with it at all. Like there's often a reason for like having like all that fancy stuff sometimes has a reason.
Yeah.
Often it doesn't. Like I totally get that sometimes like people that has just learned about the concept of inheritance just do a lot of crazy inheritance stuff, and the same goes for functional programming. But like sometimes the seemingly complex things are there to deal with complexity in a structured way instead of just piling it in a mess. But was he aware? What I want to know, was he aware about like the negative consequences that he had on? It has to make you feel like less autonomous. It has to feel like you as an employee, you don't have control over your own destiny. Like the team has this thing like, oh, things break because the CEO is coding things, and we can't fix that. We don't have the power to do that. It would make me feel like less autonomous and less powerless.
Well, I don't know, because so when I was there, it was sort of like at the end part of the like exit process, like they sold and then they had to be there for 5 years, and I was there for 2 of those years, like the 2 last years, and when they eventually got like fully acquired, then the founders left after 1 week, and then I left after 1 month because I still liked the founders.
Okay, so you arrived in like the 2 last years of the vest in peace period, so to speak.
Yes, so they didn't think about what was to come. They only wanted to like make it as good as possible. So they didn't want to tweak things too much, because what if like we lost a lot of revenue because we was doing like this whole like infrastructure project.
I see.
So I think that was also, so he was just clever.
Yeah.
And short-sighted, and for good reasons.
Sure.
But it was frustrating. And I think that the consequences are that like probably good people will quit because they can't stand that.
Yeah.
And I guess
I rejected that job offer from them.
And I think perhaps that's the way to deal with it, like to just, I don't know if you can do this as an employee still being there, but to convince your peer coders to just leave so that you can reap the benefits when they finally realize that this is a really, really, really bad way of running things.
Yeah.
But I think that when people start leaving, they sort of figure that out. That has happened to me at another company that I left, and then a bunch of other sort of like pretty good employees left, and now they have changed their business culture because they realized that that didn't work. Okay, but we were talking about if it was like the CEO or perhaps the CTO, but what if it's the like software architect?
Yeah.
And they are making bad decisions. How do you deal with that?
I actually had a friend of mine ask me about that just a few days ago. He was in a situation where I got the sense that he was about to refactor and improve some piece of code, and the architect, and this was a really small place. It was like the team is basically him and this other dude and some other dude. And the architect told him to like not do that and just leave it be so that it doesn't break. And like,
What do you mean that it doesn't break? Like, yeah, that
like,
it
don't
would
touch
break
the-
if he would refactor. Oh, he was afraid that if he were to refactor it, perhaps
Exactly.
things would break.
like the code is working, it wasn't working.
Don't touch it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It sort of works. Don't touch it. And like, because this is I asked, like, okay, let me guess, this company does not have a continuous integration suite, does not have unit test, doesn't have like integration test, doesn't have mandatory code review. And he said yes, 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 and yes. So it's a company that probably just the startup that has just gone and they're not experienced in building, like, they have not worked on projects that are maintained for a long period of time. So they are not used to building software where you optimize for change.
Yeah.
Like when you're building like a startup project, you're optimizing for like getting to an MVP fast. Like you're optimizing for output. But after a while, once you have a like mature product that where it's important that it works for customers and it's reliable and it's functional, then you need to be able to make changes safely and effectively on your software. And then you need to have like readable code. You need to have unit tests in place and stuff like that. And that person was probably not used to that. But what he did, he was very close to quitting, actually, which was, of course, my knee-jerk reaction was like, just quit. Like, you're a developer, you can find a job very easily. You have lots of work experience. You don't really have to take this. We have this luxury. But he was like debating whether or not he should quit, silently, because he was an external consultant and he could just
Silently,
bow out.
like he would just not show up and see if someone noticed.
No, but he was like, just make an excuse and say that,
He
oh,
would, no. He
quit for
would
personal
show up
reasons.
but not do anything. That
Oh,
is
yeah.
silent quitting.
That is, yeah, actually, yes. A lot of, that's another interesting question. Perhaps we should talk about that later. But he ended up actually bringing up the issues with his with that person over lunch, and said that this was what you asked me to do. There was not. I didn't feel quite okay, and he said that he felt listened to. I think if you talk to people in if you think about how you communicate something to a person, then you very well might get a good response. And like, don't do it in a passive aggressive way, like the person is well-meaning and understand where that person is coming from, but like, bring it up. And yeah.
If they still don't adopt to what you think, or perhaps what the community of developers think, then you leave.
Yeah.
Is that the advice?
I would say so. Like, try to make a best effort in changing the situation.
Perhaps
but in
they,
the end,
and also perhaps they have reasons that you don't know about.
yeah, exactly.
Like, they could be business reasons that you shouldn't know, because it would just be harmful for you to know too much, because you would lose focus or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they might just be using their, like, as a product owner or something, they might be just using their shit umbrella to protect you from things. But that might also be, like, sometimes it's bad to know too little, because you don't get the whole picture, and then you just, why the hell are we doing this? But in the end, it's very important that you feel like you have autonomy over your own situation. Like, that is, it will be very unmotivating, and you should really avoid being in a workplace that does that. And it's very possible to find a place where you have a high degree of autonomy over your work. Like, you don't have to suffer through that in most areas of the world as a developer.